And that, of course, takes us to 21, the 21st mystery, initiations into the holy energy of the saints, and the final entry of the soul into the realm of the ascended. Although good and evil exist within the program, when a soul achieves the ascension and the immortal and eternal nature, duality no longer exists. As a result, darkness becomes an absence, and light becomes a fullness. So what's happening is the soul is literally moving to a point where they rise above the din of the world. And in that space, that sphere, that does not mean that good and evil do not still exist here in this world. They do. It is a world of good and evil. But in that consciousness they now embody, there is no duality. There just is. It just is. Very hard to explain. But going on, this is partly too talking about translating the Book of the Eights, which was a thing that I had to do. The Book of the Eights, going back to the Eights, 7 is the completion, 8 is the immortal. And the Book of the Eights was given to me inside the tomb of the Khufu in the pyramid, the Great Pyramid. And the Book of the Eights is the book of life, which is when your name is inscribed upon it, you have entered into the realm of the ascended. And so you go through this period where you translate the Book of the Eights. And so you go through experiences where you are understanding what does it mean to enter into the book of the living. And here I say, as all ignitions and lightings have been accomplished, all flames accounted for within the condensed confines of the initiating soul, the fire must now be brought to full fruition. And this is also, you know, talking about into the holy life of the saints, the holy energies of the saints as well, is you're going into more and more into the royal family of God, which is all of the prophets, saints, mystics, sages, and ascetics, and you will be taught by them. You'll be taught of them as you continue through this, because now you are seeking that particular quality, that energy that they, like for instance here from Toth Hermes Trismegistus, then being naked of all the accumulations, the soul comes to the 8th sphere, namely the ring of the fixed stars. And so that is what we are doing in this 21st, I believe, mystery that we are in as well. It is like a birthing, and there are some experiences in here, and you'll experience this in the mystical. You go through like birthings at different points in the spiritual life as well, and you're bringing something in. You're giving birth to something in this realm. And Emanuel Swedenborg spoke of it in this way: this faith is first set forth in a universal and in a particular form, that it may serve as a preface set before the work that follows, also as a gate giving entrance to a temple. And that's what you're doing. You're literally going into a sphere where you reside above the din of this mortal karmic world, beyond duality. It's a beautiful, peaceful place to travel to. As from Dante's Paradise, he says, within the heaven where peace divine inhabits, circles round a body, in whose virtue lies the being of all that it contains. And so that is, you're going to now be learning from the prophets, saints, mystics, sages, and ascetics in particular. And it's really I mean, this is like a real turning point in the journey, because you are being given entry into such a holy offering at that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
And what it says here, okay, so the darkness becomes more of an absence and the light of fullness. And so you're able to understand that that's the nature of dark and light energy. So you seek the fullness rather than the absence. And it's not just of light, it's of substance, because what we are seeking with God is substantial and real, whereas what we are seeking as karmic beings is completely unreal and momentary and very limited, and truly serves no purpose other than karmic circling, which has no purpose other than habitual, repetitive behaviors. And so this is a birth point into eternal life. And so the 22nd mystery, the rites of the medicine and the alteration of reality. No soul may proceed forth until they have learned to give back that which has been taken from the high frequency energetic flow of evolution, and to restore that which has been lost within humankind below. That is, again, what we've talked about, giving back to creation all that creation has given to us. From the knowledge of the higher worlds and its attainment, and this one is by Rudolf Steiner. Preparation consists in a strict and definite cultivation of the life of thought and feeling, through which the psycho-spiritual body becomes equipped with higher senses and organs of activity in the same way that the natural forces have fitted the physical body with organs built out of indeterminate living matter. Very well stated, because we do receive a completely new body in the spiritual world.
There's something I really like in this chapter. And by the way, in chapter 21, there was a lot of really cool things. So
kind of hard to summarize, but we're kind of doing our best. But
it's
you
good.
really want to read the book as well.
Yes, definitely. Or like as I do,
necessary.
I listen to the audios.
Yes.
Whatever works for you. The Buddha on the unreality of man's desires of shadows and illusions. This is something that you had an out-of-body experience with a dark one disguised behind a ceramic head, holding her heart in her hand.
Yes.
And how she saw uncaring disguised as religious dogma, sloth disguised as victimization, heartlessness disguised as political views, arrogance disguised in self-esteem, manipulation and self-aggrandizement disguised as some form of spirituality, which to you was the most painful. She said, this dark one disguised behind a ceramic head, I am humanity.
Yes.
It is humility that is watered by tears. Where there is humility, that love grows, and from love comes wisdom. It's very interesting, that whole Buddha on the unreality of man's desires of shadows and illusions, because there's so much of that.
Yes. And this is, the state of the human soul, and we have to deal with our delusions, our illusions, the lies we tell ourselves, all of that. And if we don't, we can't progress. And yeah, it's interesting too, like in the 22nd mystery, I just counted, it's like 75 pages. So we're really going to summarize on that one for sure.
There's two parts as well. So.
Yeah. And so it's, but this is the rites and the medicine and alteration of reality. And we've talked a lot about that, because that's where you're becoming an instrument of creation, you know. So for me, I was taken to meet the medicine women throughout all ages and transformed into another medicine woman, where then they trained me and taught me how to use the balls of light to alter reality in the management realm, which is where things happen in thought, word, and deed before they hit the ground. And that's where the spiritual worlds can go to alter the outcome of something we might be creating through our thoughts, words, deeds, etc. And so,
Also, as a spiritual, you're becoming a spiritual warrior, but you brought up either in this chapter 22 or part 2 of 22 how you went in to make an alteration where you knew that somebody was going to be coming into an establishment with a gun. And so what you did is you kind of used your body as a shield so that other people would not get injured. And I believe Chief Joseph was with you as your guide and your teacher at that
yes,
point. And so, but you did it like 3-4 times. But the thing was, is that every time you did it, you forgot that you used the same technique every time, where you just used your body as the shield. But that's in alteration. The goal is to not take a hit. So we
right.
go in, we help with the alteration, but we maintain our own energy when we go into that. So that's
Yeah.
important to put that out there.
And when you say not to take a hit, what that means is that we're going in, and this is what Chief Joseph was trying to teach me, and I kept screwing it up, and he was having me do it until I finally realized just using my body and taking the bullets wasn't the best alteration, because what that does is every hit that we take, what it affects us energetically. It affects our ability to serve creation from higher spheres. So we learn to make alterations and to intervene in situations like these in a way that doesn't cause us harm either. And so we are moving light to alter a situation. And so that's what it means. We don't want to take an energetic hit, because that limits our effectiveness in future work. And so, yes, there's a lot in here from my work with St. Joseph. Well, I call him St. Joseph, but it's Chief Joseph. And, you know, and the Native American medicine women, but also the chanters. There were these male chanters who would sit in a circle in a fire, and they would chant songs to help me to learn these things that I needed to learn.
And you didn't feel worthy of it. You're like, why are you doing
Right.
this? I'm just like non-Native American.
Well, and you know, speaking of, because what we learn through the alterations is that we're always looking for the higher alteration. So here's just a word from Mary Baker Eddy: progress takes off human shackles. And so that's what we're trying to do in alteration, is we're trying to remove shackles. Ironically, this is also in response to the vision that I had that we spoke about earlier, where Jesus was in shackles and he told me that it was my purpose, is your purpose, to release the bondage Christianity has put upon Christ's spirit. And at the moment, I was very shocked by that pronouncement. But what it is this misunderstanding of what the Lord was teaching us in the Gospels, and what he was trying to teach us as to how do we actually evolve. You know, and so there are shackles in Christianity. Reincarnation was one of them, but there's others that keep souls from being able to move forward. And that's very serious, because again, we go back to the sin against the Holy Spirit. The sin against the Holy Spirit is stopping the Holy Spirit in humankind. And so
Could you repeat
we have to recognize
Zoom?
things
Just
that
sorry.
block that kind of progress, and that's what you're learning.
Can
The
you hear
rites
me?
of the medicine and alteration of reality is, how do you best alter things in a way that doesn't cause harm to you, and doesn't cause harm to anyone else who might be working with you in the alteration team, but also what is going to be the highest alteration outcome that we're going to go for, and which one should we go for. And so that's a lot of it.
I was wondering if we could just step back a second to the rituals leading to the native and the sacred hoop.
Okay,
Could we talk about that real quick?
sure.
It's just for some reason it was, I was hoping you could talk about it.
Oh,
I would just bring it
okay.
up and then you go, oh yes, of course. That's when
Yeah,
I,
yeah, the return to the native was a definitive period of alteration that I went through where, and it was funny because Chief Joseph and a couple of other chiefs were involved in it, and they thought it was hilarious. You know, they would play pranks on me in the mystical and out-of-body travel states to kind of force the city out of me. They wanted me to return to this natural understanding, and the irony being, you know, you know, that my mother was, you know, this total green goddess. You know, my grandmother as well. My mother could grow anything. And, you know, she canned everything. She was very much in touch with nature, even though we lived in a suburb while I was growing up. But what they were doing was pushing out the effects of modern society that had made me not compatible to the natural world. And so I had to become comfortable with the natural world again. And we all have that to some extent, depending on where we live, where we, what we do and how we live, where we become less compatible to what is natural. And so they were bringing me, ironically, at the time, they were preparing me for, I was, living in the Midwest, and they were getting ready to move me to the mountains of Colorado. So they wanted me to get comfortable with nature real quick. And, I lived there for 27 years in the mountains and loved it, So there was a lot of rituals returning to the native. And the other one was sacred hoop, which was one that I bring up a lot because I had a lot of initiations around the sacred hoop throughout many, many years. And it had to do with what we're doing in the sacred hoop is we are reuniting birth and death and creating this continuity. There were many times earlier on in my journey, remember, where I had to specifically break through this barrier, this threshold, and speak to my older self. And so when I would be young and I needed to speak to my older self, because in so doing, I was making a connection in this sacred hoop that would make it much more likely that I would achieve my destiny through the work that I was sent here to do. I needed to connect with that old, wise woman when I was young, so that it would lead me in the proper way. And so the sacred hoop is this continuity of energy. It's the cycle of life that these initiations into the sacred hoop are about bringing those different points in a life together so that the soul is more likely to follow the path of their actual destiny rather than, falling away from it. Now, remember again, there are destinies and fates, and I've talked about this before. Fates have more to do with, personal issues and things like this, whereas destiny has to do with your universal purpose, what you were sent on earth to do for humankind. That's your work for God. Fates are more things to do with personal relationships and people and karma and people you may know that you recognize from different lifetimes. So we're talking about destinies versus fates. And so the sacred hoop, the initiations of that are to cement and help the soul to carry over their destiny, make sure that they are moving in that proper direction to achieve it in this time construct, time frame. So yeah, those were very important things. Yeah, with the return to the native, they were taking me into situations where I had to get more and more and more comfortable with natural environments rather than the city environment that I was in at the time. Even though I lived out in the country when I had these things, I was still living a relatively city life, and I'd become incompatible with the natural world. And there is a power in being in unity with the natural world. Ironically, I remember that many of these experiences with the sacred hoop, I would see myself as this much older woman, which I am now. You know, I think I was older than I am now, but I would always be tending to this garden. You know, I was leaning over and pulling out weeds in this garden and tending to this garden. And of course, now in my older years, I've really reclaimed what my mother taught me and her mother taught her about, you know, how to nurture and bring forth life. So, sorry, my dog heard something, so hang on a second.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
How's it going? Is the sound? I think the sound is off. I can't hear you.
Now you can, right?
Yep.
Okay, and I was just saying, you're going to edit this out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we'll just return to the native.
Well, let's talk about the 5 winds of alteration. alteration of perception, the outcome of a physical event, removal of dark energies around souls, removal of evil spirits or demons around souls, and rendering benign or de-energizing demons. Because isn't that the essence of alteration?
Yes. Yes. And this was something that I was taken through with Chief Joseph and those other natives who would chant and sing songs for me to help me get through them. Yeah. So these 5 winds are they're winds because it's a movement of soul. They are winds through the spirit. And so these are the different things that we can alter: perception, physical events, the removal of darkness, dark energy, removal of evil spirits, and then the final being, rendering benign or de-energizing demons that are incarnate in human form. And so you go through this procedure of learning that takes you through all of that, and the final level being where you are able to um, dismantle, is what it's called, dismantle a demonic force and send them back to hell. And that's one of the ways that we can serve creation.
And this is reminiscent of the story of you in the boat with the monk.
Oh,
and,
yes.
and having the demons. And then even further with that, as you share about that, perhaps if you feel guided to, where that in the common man, the common family, how there are demons present. Most everybody is possessed in some manner.
Well, and when we use the word possessed in this context, it's different from the word possession in the, like a Catholic exorcist's terminology, because most people aren't possessed in that way. But we, as human beings, most people do have some type of major demonic influence around them that of which they're unaware. And it, part of this is because of the, just thinking about certain vices can bring them into our vicinity. But thinking of virtues can also bring angels into our vicinity. So we're energizing things towards us or away from us, depending on where we stand.
And you've also talked about when we're doing that, you just said virtues, angels are coming in, and thinking about certain vices, maybe dark ones or demons coming in. So we're actually conjuring up
Yes.
beings according
Well,
to our feelings and thoughts, right?
well, I wouldn't say conjure. We're giving them entry, is what we're doing. And definitely by the nature of our thoughts, we do generate energy, whether it's good or evil, by the nature of our thoughts as well. So it's not just bringing those demons towards us, but it's also just the energy we're putting around us and creating around us. And going back to the monk, the demons of the common man, I was taken to this island of demons, and I was seeing just a typical family. And there was uh, one member of the family who was uh, struggling with inappropriate sexual attention of some kind, always flirting with people, and it was just an inappropriate sexual attention. There was a demon of rage. There was a person who, the way they put it was, you know, recites or recounts to Beelzebub by the nature of the thoughts that the person had. And so that's just, without even realizing it, she's, making
Incantations, I believe.
yes, incantations. There you go. And then I'm trying to remember what the other member was. Um, but I think I don't remember, but it could be anything. It can be this false attachment to our self-intelligence, the lower demon, things like that. And the monk had asked me to get in the rowboat to go away from the island, but then he let the demons in the boat too, and I was like, what? But the monk was, completely imperturbable. He was able to recognize these creations as part of the nature of humanity, he was able to be imperturbable and just be at peace with, while the demons, the rage demon is raging, and the one who's got the inappropriate sexual needs is trying to come on to him, and he's just completely unmoved, and so he was teaching me that the nature of the demonic is not, and the nature of the darkness within humanity is not necessarily, especially if you're called to work with the demonic in that way, not something to be feared, but to be understood. And he had a very profound understanding of it. You know
And
what I mean?
compassion.
And the compassion as well. Yeah, total compassion. He understood the nature of, as they would say in Buddhism, of these arisings. These are arisings that come from the nature of impure and contaminated thinking. And that's part of the reason why it's so necessary that we all go through this grand purification. It's because if we don't, that's what we remain. We don't alter, we don't change, we don't evolve, we don't move forward. And so, go
Also,
ahead.
he taught the lesson to you, or maybe something you already knew, but he went over it again, that these dark ones, they knew no happiness.
Yes.
And how sad is that? And so to
It was
really
very
have,
sad. Yes. They
and
could not they could not achieve happiness because the objects of their attentions were false. And again, going back to the object, their objects of all their attentions were false. And
wow.
for instance, another excellent sentence from Rudolf Steiner.
I like Rudolf Steiner.
Yeah. On the one hand, he follows all processes of growing and flourishing, and on the other, of withering and decaying in a way that is necessary for his own and the world's advancement. That's the nature of alteration, is that we are destroying the things that wither, and we are following the processes of growing and flourishing, but we're doing them at the same time. There's this constant destruction creation that is going on in the purification process of the human soul.